Stu, go.
Thank you, Mary. Good morning, everybody, in person and in Zoom. Thanks for taking the time to be here. So let me start by just kind of sharing some things about my family growing up as a child. And some of you know some of this, maybe some of you don't know any of it, but here we go. I grew up in a very traditional RLDS family. I was one of 6 siblings. Unfortunately, my oldest sibling, Mark, he actually passed away before I was born. So it was a sibling that I never knew, in the physical sense. He actually died about 6 weeks before I was born. He had a heart defect, and he actually passed away on the operating table as they were trying to fix it. And I'll share a little bit more about that story a little bit later on. So, growing up, I was one of now a total of 5 siblings, and again, a very traditional RLDS family. My mom and dad were both very active in a lot of ways. Mom was always the behind-the-scenes person, doing a lot of stuff for church, but not in the upfront public ministry way. My dad, heavily involved as a youth camp director. It was always with a mixed bag. I would go to junior camp, junior high camp, senior high camp. And when I learned that my dad was going to be the director, I just kind of went, oh gosh. Dad's going to be watching me to make sure that I'm behaving and so forth. But just watching Dad kind of be that upfront minister, and some of you might know this, Spectacular moved to Lamoni in the summer of 1971. My dad and another one of his closest friends, Tom Cochran, were 2 of the original directors. Dad directed from 71 till probably about 88, 89. Unfortunately, Tom Cochran, he had a series of health problems. He passed away in 1980, but Dad continued on for a number of years after Tom passed away. And so watching my mom and dad as up front for Dad, behind the scenes for Mom, it was just kind of like watching them work relative to the church work was really kind of part of my upbringing from day number 1. I was traditional from the standpoint that I was baptized at the age of 8. I have to confess, it was me and probably 7 or 8 other youth that were baptized kind of at a baptism service. And I know some of you have very powerful baptism stories, but when you're 8, and probably it was just a given that you would be baptized, I can't sit here and tell you that it was an all-inspiring moment. It was just part of what our family did. You turned 8, took your pre-baptism courses, and then you got baptized. But more on that maybe a little bit later. So growing up, the early remembrances growing up, another person that I never ever got to meet, who still to this day has influenced my life, was my mother's father, and a lot of you know the name Evan Fry. Evan Fry was the radio minister for the RLDS Church for about 18 years. Approximate years would have been 1938 to maybe before that, because he passed away in 1959. So anyway, he was radio minister for about 18 years. He operated out of the Stone Church. Stone Church at that time was home to KMBZ Radio, which is still a radio station in existence today. And when I learned that my grandpa was on the radio, I thought, man, my grandpa is kind of a rock star. He's like on the radio. And I had these visions of a radio studio being this really complex, big room with big monitors and big boxes and, but come to find out, KMBZ Radio, when they moved into the Stone Church, they actually moved it into a janitor's closet. They moved all the janitorial supplies out, and KMBZ radio came in. And so according to my mom and dad, I never really saw the room. It was a traditional janitor-sized closet with room for microphones and maybe a little desk and so forth. And so I learned a lot as I kind of got into my teenage years about Grandpa Fry, and having him share a lot with various ways in which I've got to know him. I've got a series of tapes at home of his radio sermons. Alan Tyree wrote a book, Evan Fry, Proclaimer of Good News, and these are all books that Grandpa Fry wrote himself, and so I feel like I kind of know him as well as I possibly could, knowing that he died 3 years before I was born. He died at a very young age of phlebitis, which is a inflammation that causes some blood clot problems, and so he died on Easter morning, actually, in 1959. So I wasn't coming around for 3 more years. Yeah, if you want to pass those around. Sure.
Before you go off of the radio thing, did they ever move that into a bigger room?
No, he was in that room the entire time. Yeah.
Well, the story I've always heard about him, which I suppose my father told, was that he was could preach the sermon and turn on all the things and then go play the organ.
Yeah, so this room did have a little keyboard. I don't know if it was a full-fledged organ, but one of the things that I learned from Mom was most Sundays he was the sermon, he was the soloist,
Yes.
and he was the prayer. And he was at least, again, according to Mom, he was at least humble enough that he didn't want people to know that the person giving the sermon and the person singing the solo were the same person. And he would say something on the radio live, and now let's listen to our ministry of music. And then he would start singing.
And my mother used to sing on that program as well.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. Well, the story that Dad loves to tell is one day there was such a big blizzard, nobody could get there except Evan.
Uh-huh.
I suppose some other technician used to come and push all the buttons.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
But on this day, because nobody could get there but him, he pushed all the buttons
I believe it.
and he prayed. He sang the solo, or I can't remember if the story is that he played the organ. I thought it was, and then he preached a sermon. So he did the whole thing in the.
Yeah.
He was so talented.
Yeah, he was.
So versatile.
Yeah, very versatile. That's the right word to describe him.
But I know my mother did sing on the radio
Yeah.
program at times.
All right, Dale.
Did you ever hear of a Russell Rish? He was involved in that radio station quite heavily.
I don't know that name.
Okay,
Yeah,
KXTR.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I learned a lot about Grandpa Fry. That really was kind of a very early formative experience for me. In fact, one of the things that sadly, we had a house fire when I was a junior in high school. Mom had this cardboard box of index cards, and the shoebox had categorized. Here were sermons on faith. Here were sermons on salvation. Here were sermons on stewardship, and it was all of Grandpa Fry's index card notes. And if you're wondering if these index cards had a wealth of information, the answer was no. They would have like 2 or 3 little bullet points. In fact, if you've ever seen what Dave Shaw brings, he's kind of an index card preacher too, and you think, how does somebody do it that well?
3 words on it.
Yeah, 3 or 4 words on it.
Yeah.
Well, that was my Grandpa Fry as well, and he would have these index cards, then he would preach his sermon from these little bullet points on the index cards. Again, sadly, we had a house fire, and these index cards got destroyed in the fire, but that was always fun to look at that. As some of you know, volleyball growing up played a big role, and you think, well, how does volleyball deal with discipleship? Well, the Blue Valley Activity Center, which was a church-operated gymnasium. If you know where Beacon Heights Congregation is in Independence, it's right next door. Sterling knows exactly where it's at. That grew up in a family of just volleyball fanatics. So we were playing volleyball from this tall. 2 older brothers, 2 younger sisters. We all
About
played.
one?
Yeah,
Or that tall?
I was about one. And so volleyball was a wonderful, it was a wonderful avenue in which to fellowship with lots of RLDS people my age. And to this day, some of those people are some of my closest friends. You know, there's the Jeff Martin, there is the Mark Stanky, who sadly passed away from cancer at way too young of an age. But just lifelong friends that I grew up playing volleyball with. And then hearing this name growing up, that my dad would say, well, there's another Stu out there in the world, that's Stu McDowell. And going, well, who the heck is this Stu McDowell guy? What's his deal with volleyball? And then obviously learning a lot about Stu's involvement in volleyball. So my whole adolescence growing up was playing this sport, but also fellowshipping with other church committed RLDS kids that to this day are some of the greatest memories you know, I will ever have. In fact, when Sterling Barlow moved to Lamoni, how many years ago now? 6? 5 years? And he came into church, and I knew that I recognized him, but I couldn't quite place him. And he introduced himself, well, I'm Sterling Barlow, and I'm coming back here for, I think it was your 50-year honor class reunion. And one of my remembrances growing up in high school is that we would go off to these volleyball tournaments. We might go to Chicago, we might go to St. Louis. We were driving all over to go play volleyball as high school age kids. And Sterling would loan us his Suburban, Chevy Suburban that was these really long, and we would take Sterling's Suburban and have our coaches drive us as a team to these tournaments all over the Midwest. So thanks for loaning us your car for all that to happen. So volleyball, even though it's just a sport, but it is a sport that really just kind of immersed me into church life even more and more. One other experience as a teenager growing up. My dad comes home and he says, this might have been on the weekend, Friday, Saturday. He says, if any of you all have plans next week, cancel them. What? What are we having to cancel for, Dad? We're gonna go to a speaker series. And here was this man that said, well, my dad said, his name is Harry Black. How many of you have heard Harry Black speak before? And so I was a typical teenager. I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding. I'm going to have to go to church on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I wasn't excited. You know, I wanted to be with my friends. I wanted to go be on my bike or be at the swimming pool. I was a typical teenager. Well, we get up to the East Alton congregation, and on the first night, again, I'm kind of like, yeah, I got to sit through 5 days of church services. How fun that is. But then Harry Black started to speak. And after about 10 minutes, I'm kind of like, man, this guy's pretty good. And then at the end of the first night going, he is really good at sharing the gospel. Well, then the next night, I'm kind of excited. What's he going to share about tonight? Well, by and large, the whole week, he delivered some of the finest sermons I think I have ever heard. He was energetic about the gospel. He knew that he believed it to his core. And so,
And he's British.
and he's British, that's right, yeah, that's right. And so I just really, really look back on that time. Again, I was probably 16, maybe 17 years old, thinking, this Harry Black guy is really good. His daughter, Michelle Black, some of you might know Michelle, I've shared this story with her that her dad was one of my early influencers relative to the gospel message. So there you go. I don't think I could do this hour without sharing a couple things about World Conference as part of my journey. For as long as I can remember, we always housed the international delegates coming to World Conference. We had Tahitians in our house, and remember back then we were having conference every 2 years. So every 2 years we would have 6 or 7 or 8 Tahitians that would stay at our house. And I would just remember, and those of you that have been around the Tahitian folks just know the joy that they bring to their beliefs. It is genuine and it is joyful. And that, again, had an impact on me. We actually took them out in the backyard where we had a basketball goal, and they would watch me or my brothers, shoot a basket and have it go in. They thought we were the greatest basketball players in the history of the world. They were just amazed that we could take this round ball and throw it into this. They thought we were like the greatest. So that was kind of fun. And then at World Conference itself, I would go with Dad and kind of listen to the legislative sessions, not understanding everything that was going on. But I remember, this was back in W. Wallace's presidency, he would, back in those days, he would just recognize people out in the congregation and say, Brother Stevenson, he's got his hand raised, and Brother Stevenson would step up and share his thoughts. And I leaned over to my dad, I said, Dad, how does he know everybody that's raising their hand? My dad said, let me tell you a secret. Just watch for 10 more minutes, and it's the same people holding their hand up every single time. So W. Wallace only had to know about 5 or 6 people's names. Yeah. And so I just remember that being a part of my journey. So Mom and Dad involved, volleyball as a vehicle to discipleship, World Conference, Mom and Dad's involvement with SPEC, volleyball in church, developing lifelong friends. All those things were formative in terms of my discipleship and Harry Black. And so now it was time to go to college. Some of you might not know, I did not go to Graceland my first year. I went to Ohio State University. My 2 older brothers had gone there to play volleyball. And I thought I'll just go and follow suit. And my oldest brother had graduated, was working on a master's degree. My other brother was 2 years old ahead of me. And so he was still playing. I thought I'll go there and play volleyball, get a degree. Well, Ohio State at that time had 60,000 students. And it wasn't for me. It was just like, man, there's just too many people here. And then some of those volleyball friends that I grew up with in Independence, Jeff Martin, Mark Stanke, Kevin Hallberg, Greg Wiley, they were all at Graceland. And I thought, you know what, I think I'm going to go to Graceland. And so I came to Graceland in the fall of '81. And there, my journey as a student athlete, as a house chaplain, being part of the campus ministries team, I got myself immersed into all things that we hope even today that Graceland students do to get immersed, not just as a student, not just as an athlete, but getting immersed in the health system, getting immersed with organizations was for me, that was a wonderful experience. Howard Booth is not here, but I think it was my first year, maybe second, learning from him in a class called Pastoral Counseling, a book written by Howard Kleinbell that I think I still have in my house. I think it's there. But listening to Howard talk about pastoral counseling was like, oh, this is really interesting how you provide ministry to others, and that again was a formative experience. But then all the other people, even those people that weren't teaching religion, so many different influences. So I came in the fall of '81. Stu and Patty came for the fall of '82. So I was at Graceland my first year without Stu and Patty here. But then when Stu and Patty got here and Stu began coaching the women's volleyball team, that began a much closer relationship with Stu and Patty about, again, volleyball, about Graceland, about ministry, and all the things that the McDowells were part of and are still a part of to this day. I also got my first priesthood call just after I entered Graceland in fall of '81. And that kind of took me to a new place going, oh gosh, I need to kind of wrap my head around what this really means. And that journey was a journey that, again, kind of allowed me to just to kind of think more seriously, even more so than I already was, about my discipleship.
And what office was it?
That office was teacher, which is I learned about the role of teacher, and they talk about the teacher helping people in conflict. And I remember Larry Wilkinson, who was the pastor down in Walnut Gardens where the call came from, talked about my ability to help people that are maybe in conflict be able to kind of address some of those issues, and that still kind of sticks with me to this day. So my journey at Graceland in so many different ways just continued the formative development. So playing volleyball and playing for Rod Shaw. When you think about all the people that played for Rod, you would hear them say, well, Rod, yeah, he was my volleyball coach, but he was really much more than that. He was a mentor. He was a campfire leader. He was a person deeply devoted to his faith. And so, it's probably doesn't do Rod justice to say, well, he was my volleyball coach. Again, for me and countless others, he was just way more than just a guy that coaches on the volleyball court. He was a mentor to so many different people. In fact, when we had Rod's memorial service, you may or may not remember, there was probably a dozen, 15 people that came up to the service who played for Rod, who, again, having them here, it wasn't because he was their coach, it was because he had a deep influence on their lives, including mine. I think about my Graceland friends, again, another part of my discipleship journey. My teammates, people on Agape. There was people like Joe Bose, Jim Lysinger, Jeff Martin, Brad Mann. Again, just formative relationships that we would have these conversations about all things religion, all things faith. And again, when I see those friends, some of whom I'm still very close to, some of whom I don't see as often anymore, you just kind of pick up where you left off, even if you haven't seen them for 5 years or 10 years. And so some very formative relationships with my friends on Agape, and my friends really kind of in the residence hall, even if they weren't Agape members. I recall one incident, I had another volleyball teammate, Joel McCartney, he was a civilian, so Agape was third floor of what is now Grayville Hall. Cheville was one floor below us, and I go to my closet looking for a pair of pants to wear, and I can't find them. Where the heck did those pants go? Well, the next thing you know, I see Joel McCartney, who's as tall as I am, wearing my pants. Joel, are those my pants? Stu, I'm sorry. I needed a pair of pants, and I just came to your room and I borrowed your pants. It's like, well, I want my pants back. Joel and I, we have kept in contact, and that's one of our funny shared stories. So, formative time as a Graceland student, and again, going back to Stu and Patty, thinking about what do I want to do for a living, going, you mean I could be around volleyball, and I can actually make a living? I could let this be my profession? That kind of led me on to a path. Again, I hope that what my players would say, yeah, Stu was my coach, but I hope that I meant more to them than just teaching them how to spike or serve or, play the game. I hope that I was a mentor. I hope that I was a listening ear. I hope that I was able to be helpful for them. So I don't need to talk much more about volleyball per se, but volleyball again entered into my life as a profession that carried me for a long time. Lori.
Well, I'm just curious, you said your rest of your brothers, sister have played volleyball. Are they all tall?
Yeah, we have a tall family. That was the running joke in the family. Mom and Dad, very normal size. Dad was 5'9". Mom was about 5'6". And all of us are tall. I'm the tallest, but my brothers are 6'4", 6'3". My two sisters, Jill, who came to Graceland, is 5'10", 5'11", and my youngest sister, Melissa, is almost 6 foot.
Wow.
Go figure.
You must have lived on the farm where the
I
fertilizer.
guess.
They lived in Independence.
That's right. So who knows where all that
Good food.
yeah, where all that came from. Yeah. So yeah, that was always the running joke. How do you explain this to people where they see mom and dad as being these very normal sized people, and all of us kids are
Towering over them.
towering over them for sure. But my dad let us know that he was still
In charge.
He was still the boss. He was still the boss. Yeah, Dad, was an airline pilot, and he also dabbled in being a landlord. Some of you have been landlords in town, Lester being one. And Dad would say to me and my brothers especially, you guys will have to be up tomorrow morning by 8:30 because we're going to go get a rental unit, clean back up. Well, you'd walk into this rental unit, the people that have left there have left everything. I mean, it's not just running the vacuum and dusting it, it's moving heavy furniture, and it's like, I would say, Dad, are we gonna get paid for this, or is the fact that you're feeding us and housing us? He goes, what do you think?
You know the answer.
Yeah, we already knew, but we had to at least ask the question.
What kind of planes do your dad fly?
He was a TWA pilot. He finished, he did 707s,
Oh my goodness.
727, and he finished with the DC, not the white body, DC-9, was that a,
Yeah,
Donald Douglas 9.
yeah.
and Kansas City was the headquarters for
Yeah,
TWA, so
and
that's,
so he loved being a pilot. Mom always joked that he probably loved it when he could go away for 4 days, and Mom had to deal with 5 kids in the house who all had various active lifestyles, ball practices, bikes, pools. Yeah, if you think about my siblings growing up, and if you witnessed the Conrad Davis family, very similar, just very active, all kinds of things going on.
What were your mom and dad's names?
Jerry and Cece.
Okay.
or Celia was her formal name, but she went by CC. So Jerry Sherman.
And how much difference between the oldest and the youngest?
My oldest brother, Brian, is 6 years older than me, so he was born in 56. My first brother, the one that passed away, he was born in 55. So Brian was 56. Then Craig wasn't until 60. I was 62. Jill was 63, and Melissa was 69. So Melissa came, and kiddingly we would say, you were the oops baby. Because there were 6 years between Jill and my youngest sister, which we had some fun at my youngest sister's expense.
I think I saw Brian play volleyball in Washington DC when Nixon brought the great big opportunity with the Chinese.
With the Chinese.
And they had an exhibition
That's right.
game, and he was one of the
Yeah.
U.S. team that got crushed by the
Yeah.
Chinese.
Yeah, both my brothers had some experience with our national teams. The national teams were that ultimately, hopefully, qualified for the Olympic Games. And so both my brothers had some involvement there. They were both very, very, very good. Yeah, so you probably did see them play a lot.
I think Dick dated a Fry girl for a while. It must have been your aunt, not your sister.
No, he dated Margaret Ann.
Margaret Ann.
Yeah, that's my aunt.
Yeah.
That's my mom's youngest sister. Yeah, Dick's told me about that before. Yeah. But he still says it worked out just
I
fine.
beat her out.
Want to make that perfectly clear.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Dick, go ahead.
Yes,
Go ahead, Dick.
his hearing is not really good.
Just tell him we can hear him.
We can hear you, Dick.
But he may not hear you.
All right. I'll move on. All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say the importance of your grandfather, Evan Fry, was very great. He was a hymn writer and composer, and he was shared an office very close to Franklin Weddle, and they worked together on hymns and many of the hymnals. And he also, like Lou was saying, he had three daughters. Your mother was one. Margaret Ann was my age, and we played in the woodwind section of the Independent Symphony. We would date sometimes, and I admired your grandfather so much for his ministry and his thinking, and to show up at the house in the summertime there and see the great man in his T-shirt, his undershirt, was shocking to me.
He was just a normal guy too.
Unfortunately, she had the type 1 diabetes. And
Yeah.
She passed through
Right.
early in life.
Yeah, my Margaret Ann, I think, passed away not long after I came back to Graceland to work. That would have been I came here to work in '93. She probably died a couple years later, '95, '96. Jim.
Yeah, just one recollection I have. My introduction to you was when you were a child, and I was going to spec as a delegation leader from Washington, D.C., as the volleyball coach for our meager little team. And remember watching the most important gold finals, and there was this little kid who was doing line judge, and I said to Jim Hazard next to me, I said, wow, they've got a kid doing line judge. And he goes, that kid knows more about volleyball than you'll ever know.
All right. Thank Jim. Tell Jim thank you for that. Yeah, we were immersed. We were immersed as a volleyball family. There's no doubt about that. One of the questions that we were asked to respond to is, why do I continue to believe, and why is my church life so critically important for me. The bottom line is there have just been so many personal experiences that just make me go, oh my, just powerful, powerful, powerful experiences. Some of which you all know. You've heard Bill McElroy talk about, I think it's probably been 9 or 10 years now, where we kind of thought we were losing Bill. You guys remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, and he came home from the hospital in Bethany to kind of come back to Lamoni Nursing Home, in essence, to die. And he reached out to me and Paul Davis, and Paul and I went over, and both of our first thoughts was, oh wow, Bill is not long for this world. He's ready. Well, as you've heard Bill share, that experience was powerful. We administered to Bill. I won't remember exactly everything that was said during that prayer of administration, but as we know, Bill recovered. And when I look at the care that he's providing Doris today, going, wow. It was just a powerful, powerful moment that Paul and I share. And even for some of those people, I look at Marie, when Jim passed, I think I was in Jim's room maybe the day before. Was it the day of? Okay. And knowing, well, I shouldn't say knowing, because I kind of thought Bill McElroy, but Jim's, his countenance, even though he wasn't speaking, you just knew you were in the presence of somebody who wasn't afraid. He was not afraid for the next life. And that impressed upon me, wow, he is true blue in his belief that I'm gonna really go to a better place, and I'm gonna go and be able to say hello to Ryan, and you're gonna stay back with Barbara and the grandkids, and you guys had your deal. Jim was gonna take care of Ryan, and you were gonna take care of the people down here, and it was a signature event of faith that when you witness that, it's like there's no way to deny that the Spirit is working in those cases. I also remember another formative experience which was also very frightening. I got called to my second office, elder, in 2000, so 7 years after moving to Lamoni. Got the call from Jim. Jim Hawley was our pastor at the time, to elder, and so I'm making my preparations to be ordained, and the Wednesday beforehand, my grandpa Sherman passed away. And so my dad calls me to let me know that Grandpa Sherman, he was 94, so it wasn't a total surprise. That Grandpa Sherman had passed away, and my dad said, you're getting ordained to elder on Sunday. Would you be willing to do the graveside service for Grandpa Sherman on Monday? Wow, was right. I said, well, Dad, I mean, I've never done a graveside service ever. I've never handled a memorial service ever. But if you want me to do it, I will put my best foot forward. And so I remember that, probably that's 20 minutes later, I think, who can I call to provide me some help? My first call was to Les Gardner. Les says, come on over. And he had ready, we all know how many services Les has presided over, and he gave me this stack of materials that was very helpful. And so I put together a very, brief 15-minute graveside service, scriptural readings, remembrances, Dad spoke, etc., etc. But we get to the graveside, And who was showing up at the graveside service? Another person I didn't really know well, but knew that he was kind of a big wig in the church. It was Carl Mesley. And I see Carl walking up to the graveside, and I stopped going, oh my goodness, it was like the first time I preached here and seeing Velma in the congregation going, oh my gosh, what if I mess this all up? And so here comes Carl Mesley to attend the graveside service of my grandpa, and I'm, heart's racing. But I think the service went well, but there I was, I got ordained at 11 o'clock on Sunday, and the next morning at 10 o'clock, I'm handing my first graveside service. And again, it wasn't me that performed, it was the Spirit helping me, knowing that I was this brand new elder, 24-hour elder that was conducting his first graveside, and just knowing that the Spirit helped me. I've also got to talk a little bit about Rich's mom. So as she was going through her cancer battle and just having conversations, well, I'll back up. So Bill and Barbara, they were people that I was responsible for calling on relative to their support of Graceland. And so I'd be out at their house just to visit and catch them up on things that were going on. And Barbara was going through her cancer battle. And we had one conversation that talked about her faith. And I remember it like it happened yesterday. She says, well, number one, I'm not afraid to die. But number two, I don't really know exactly what the afterlife is going to be like, but I know it's going to be awesome. And for someone as wise and smart and full of wisdom as Barbara Higdon was, that to me was a powerful moment, because it made me realize in my own discipleship, I don't have to have all of the answers. I can't sit here and tell you, I know exactly what heaven is going to look like. If someone like Barbara Higdon, one of the smartest people I've ever met, male or female, says that, then that gives me permission that it's okay for me not to have a perfect knowledge about what that next life is going to be like. The other question, I'm looking at time, I think I'm doing okay on time. The tough times that you go through relative to knowing that you're not in any battle alone. I think most of you are aware my first marriage ended in divorce. That was in 1995. Growing up and being a young adult, divorce is what happened to other people. That was kind of my mindset. Divorce doesn't happen to me. It's like, no. Well, when you learn the news that it's going to go that direction, it was a challenging time. Sterling was almost 3, so he was involved in the process of deciding what to do. But throughout that process, and that whole process probably took 6, 7, 8 months, worry, followed by peace, by legal stuff, followed by peace, by wondering if I should pursue custody, and going, can I really do this? Can I teach at Graceland? Can I coach at Graceland and still be a good dad? Followed by peace. I mean, at every turn, whenever I would have these moments of anxiety and questioning my own ability if I could really be a good dad if I did pursue custody, it was always followed by these moments of peace, knowing that I wasn't making these decisions and going through this process all by myself. That the good Lord was with me, guiding me, and not necessarily providing me the answers, but just knowing, hey, I'm with you in this. I'm by your side. Keep working through it. Keep making decisions, and I'll be there to be supportive. My discipleship, and which might be different than some of you, the Holy Spirit hasn't been the Holy Spirit that has whapped me upside the head. It's been more of the little gentle taps, that reminder that the Holy Spirit is with you. It wasn't the knock you to the ground moments. It was more of the gentle assurances that he had some help when life became tough. And then when, as I think most of you know, that starting to remain here in Lamoni, I became kind of the single parent in 1995, and the challenges of raising a child while immersed out at Graceland and the time involvement was like, whoo, you know, keeping one foot in front of the other was critical. I think Starting promised he would listen to this interview maybe later on. I hope that he would say that his dad did an okay job making him a priority, even with responsibilities out at Graceland of teaching, of coaching, of recruiting, and so forth. But the Spirit led us there, led me there. And then when you think about, I've been pretty fortunate, so divorce, not wish that on anybody in the process. But then I think about my recent departure from Graceland, just a couple years ago, that to be really honest, those are some of the emotions that I still work through to this day. That even though I left on my own to accept another position, there was just a lot of things that were happening that I still don't have quite resolved even today, and it will be 3 years in December. That when I kind of play the scenario of what happened in my mind, I still have those moments of peace, of assurance that, yeah, I'm still working through it. It seemed like it's longer than I would have guessed, but almost 3 years in December, when I grapple with some of the things that happened and some of the conversations that happened that just weren't very pleasant conversations, I know that I've got my friend, the Holy Spirit, helping me through that. Because Graceland still holds a very important place for me in so many different ways. I want Graceland to be successful. I want Graceland to enjoy success in everything. But you kind of have to work your way through the personal side of things that transpired there. And then I have to confess, when I became the single dad to Sterling, I didn't give it a lot of thought, but so 95, I became the single parent, and then Amy and I weren't married until 2009. And so, there was 14 years of just me and Sterling, and every now and then I would kind of go, I wonder if I will ever be married again. And again, it didn't consume me. It wasn't like I wasn't desperate. I had plenty on my plate and plenty of fulfilling things happening to me. Graceland was fulfilling, raising Sterling was fulfilling, church life was fulfilling. It wasn't like I was home being miserable. I wasn't. Life was still good, even though I had no adult partner to share it with. But then in 2007, when Amy was talking to some friends, she was talking to Linda DeBarth and Chantel Rainey, seemed like one other person, I don't know if I'll remember, and Amy was ready to date. And Linda and Chantel said, well, what kind of person do you want to date? Well, I want somebody that's taller than me. Check. Because I want somebody that cares about their discipleship. You know, I want somebody that's fun. And she rattled off a couple other adjectives. And Linda and Chantel said, you should date Stu Sherman. It's like, and so when I realized that, and Amy and I started our courtship, we dated for 2 years. In fact, the night I proposed to Amy was Christmas Eve, 2007. We had our Christmas Eve service back here. Bob Bjorlin comes up to me, and he takes Amy by the hand. He sees no ring on her finger. And Bob Bjorlin goes, what in the world are you thinking?
What's wrong with you?
What is wrong with you, Stu? Well, unbeknownst to Bob, we were going to go home after the Christmas Eve service, and I was going to propose then. So I was like literally a half an hour away from proposing. So I proposed to Amy Christmas Eve, and then the next morning, Christmas morning, I said, I need to call Bob. So I called Bob on the phone. Well, Bob, what you didn't know last night is that I proposed to Amy last night after the Christmas Eve service, and
She said yes.
and she said yes. She said, Stu, I'll get back to you tomorrow with my answer. So that was good. And then Amy and I got married in April I proposed in December of 2008, and we got married in April of 2009. And when I think in terms of our life together, and you know, not the right word, getting myself involved with her kids, and kind of blending that family. And then of course Macy came along. And so when I think about Amy and I's life together, just another example where 14 years of being single, but then leading me to a partner that I know is committed to church, committed to discipleship, committed to trying to be helpful to other people. It's just been a blessing. Even though Amy would say, there have been a few times I wondered about what I decided, but I think she says that tongue in cheek. Yeah. So that kind of is a long answer to why I continue to believe and why my church involvement is so important. It's because of all these experiences, many of which involve you all. You know, it's our worship services here. It's going into Marion's office after Tom passed away, just to check on how Marion is doing. It's conversations with Paul as we were both doing the fundraising for Graceland, having those experiences. I mean, just so many experiences that have reassured me that the Spirit works, that the Holy Spirit is present, and that oftentimes comes from my involvement with you. And I'll still confess, there are times now, maybe I'm getting home late from a trip, and it's Saturday night, and I get home at 11:30 at night, and you wake up Sunday morning going, oh man, kind of tired. Maybe I'll just stay at home. But then I make the decision to come, and then when I walk out, I go, I'm glad, even though I'm a little fatigued, I'm glad that I came. I'm glad that I was here. So we're almost about out of time, but there's kind of my story. Yes, sir, Lester.
Does any of your brothers or sisters have leg troubles?
No, we're all doing very good. In fact, my oldest brother just climbed, not to the top summit, but he just got done climbing 3/4 of Mount Everest in Nepal. And my other brother played at the USA Volleyball Open Championships. They have They have age groupings. He played in the 60 and over age group. And so we're all still hanging right in there.
Except for you and your.
Except for me and my knees are falling down steps.
Yeah, all that.
Yeah.
Except for that.
Gee. Yeah. Yeah, Lou.
I'm interested in your wrestling, I'll say, with the decision to leave the volleyball and go to development.
Yeah. So being a volleyball coach was all that I had done, and being a teacher was all I had ever done in my professional career. So I left Grayson in 1986 after I graduated. So from 86 to 93, I was coaching and teaching in various places. Then Tom Powell calls me, letting me know that Rod was going to retire, and would I be interested in coming back to take over for Rod? Come here, we have some success. I'm loving it. I'm enjoying teaching. I'm enjoying coaching. And then Kelly Everett comes and knocks on my door. And I thought when he asked me about being a development officer, I thought, are you sure you want to be at my office? Are you knocking on the right door? And he kind of shared with me why he thought I would be good. And that was another spirit, because as I prayed about that decision, going, my entire identity is as a coach and as a teacher. And so, I mean, and on the volleyball side, we had a national championship team. I was doing okay. And so I really kind of thought, what do I do here? Do I say yes to the invitation? Do I stay as a coach, which is my identity? And I didn't have the Holy Spirit whap me upside the head. The Holy Spirit told me, whatever you decide to do, I'll be with you. That gave me great comfort knowing that if I choose to stay as a coach and a teacher, the Lord's going to be with me. If I decide to make this career change, the Lord's going to be with me. And I ultimately decided I was ready for a new challenge. Talked a lot to people. I talked to Tom Powell quite a bit about it. Talked to Stu and Patty a lot about it. Talked to my siblings who were volleyball people about it. And ultimately, knowing that I can continue my discipleship and my service to Graceland in a different role, and meeting so many other people like you all out there on the road. Paul and I could share 3 hours of stories of people that we met that are just like you all, committed disciples, loving people. It was a decision I'm glad that I made, and I think Paul would say the same thing when he was considering leaving his noted profession of TV broadcasting. Like, man, this is all I've ever done. But I think we made some right choices. In fact, just a few days ago, so Rich, Shirley would be your, what would she be to you?
Shirley was my mother's aunt.
Yeah, so Barbara's aunt, Shirley Brizendine, who I called on out in California, I got a call from her son that Shirley had passed away just the day before. And I'm thinking, gosh, I haven't seen Shirley and John Brizendine for almost 3 years now. And yet she thought enough to write my name down that when I pass, would you please let Stu know? Man, that makes your heart feel good that you made an imprint on their life in that way. And she was 6 weeks shy of her 100th birthday. You know, it's like, wow, to get that call, it was pretty special, because I didn't need to make that list of people to call when her time to move on came.
Shirley's husband, Johnny Brizendine, was president of McDonnell Douglas.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I don't know how long that was. It was a stretch.
Long stretch.
And when I got my MBA, it was from Pepperdine University, but I did my coursework in the Bay Area. But I went down to Pepperdine to graduate, we stayed with Johnny and Shirley. That was the last time I have seen them, so that
Yeah.
was 82.
82, yeah, yeah, good people. So to get that call and to still hear from the people that I called on in development, it still means a lot.
What year did you go to development?
2004. So I coached and taught at Grayson for 11 years, 93 to 04. And then 04, June of 04. Yeah. Well, I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's kind of what you wanted me to
Absolutely.
share.
Yeah.
I hope you wanted, that's what you wanted to hear. Thank you.